How is it possible that a tropical fruit, harvested by hand 3,000 miles away, shipped across international borders on a massive boat, and chemically ripened in a special gas chamber, costs less than an apple grown just a few counties over? This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. Today we are diving into one of the most confusing, mind-bending, and frankly bizarre paradoxes in the modern supermarket. It is a mystery that has puzzled economists, shoppers, and fruit enthusiasts for decades. It is the battle of the fruit bowl. In one corner, we have the apple, the domestic darling, the pride of Washington state, the fruit that supposedly keeps the doctor away. In the other corner, we have the banana, the exotic traveler, the tropical clone, the yellow boomerang that has somehow become the cheapest item in your grocery cart. If you look at the price tag, it makes 0 sense. Logistically, the banana should be an expensive luxury. It is highly perishable. It travels extreme distances. It requires climate control every step of the way. And yet, it is often sold for pennies, acting as the absolute anchor of value for the entire grocery store. Meanwhile, the local apple, which can be thrown in the back of a truck and driven down the highway, often costs 2 or 3 times as much. So how did we get here? How did we engineer a world where sending a fruit on a trans-continental cruise is cheaper than driving it across the state line? To answer that, we have to peel back the layers of history, biology, economics, and a little bit of dark geopolitical maneuvering. We are going to look at the industrialized miracle of the Cavendish banana and compare it to the high-maintenance diva that is the modern apple. Let us start with a little history lesson, because the banana's low price tag is not an accident of nature. It is a deliberate, engineered reality. Back in 1870, a sea captain could buy bananas in Jamaica and sell them in Boston for a 1,000% profit. That is not a typo, 1,000%. Back then, the banana was a luxury, an exotic curiosity that often arrived rotten because sailing ships were too slow. But then, a few ambitious entrepreneurs decided to change the game. We are talking about guys like Minor C. Keith and Lorenzo Dow Baker. These weren't just farmers, they were empire builders. They realized that the only way to solve the problem of rotting fruit was to control absolutely everything. This is what business nerds call vertical integration, but in the late 19th century, it was just called owning the world. Unlike the apple industry, which was, and still is, made up of fragmented, independent growers, the banana industry was built by massive transnational corporations. These companies, which eventually merged into giants like the United Fruit Company, did not just buy the fruit, they bought the land, they built the railroads, they owned the ports, they built the steamships. They created a banana empire that operated like its own country within Central America. By the 1930s, the United Fruit Company owned about 3.5 million acres of land. They were the single largest landowner in countries like Guatemala. This allowed them to transition from microscale agricultural art, which is how we used to grow food, to macroscale agricultural science. They turned the messy, unpredictable process of farming into a precise industrial machine. They eliminated every single middleman. When you buy an apple, you are paying for the grower, the packer, the distributor, the trucker, and the retailer. When you buy a banana, for a huge chunk of history, you are paying one company that owned the entire chain from the dirt to the shelf. They even manipulated governments to keep costs down. You have heard the term Banana Republic, right? That is not just a clothing store. It was a real economic reality where fruit companies used their financial power to shape the politics of host nations. They controlled land use laws to get prime dirt for next to nothing. And when things didn't go their way, they called in the big guns. Literally. In 1954, when the government of Guatemala tried to take back some unused corporate land to give to peasants, the United Fruit Company leveraged its connections to spark a CIA-backed coup. Now that is a level of cost control that your local apple orchard just cannot compete with. Domestic apple growers rely on market efficiency. The banana empire relied on geopolitical domination. But it is not just about history and power, it is also about biology. And this is where things get really sci-fi. The banana you eat today, the Cavendish, is a clone. Every single Cavendish banana in every supermarket around the world is genetically identical to every other one. They are seedless, they are uniform, they are predictable. This biological uniformity is the holy grail of logistics. Because every banana ripens at exactly the same rate when you hit it with ethylene gas, the supply chain can be timed with military precision. It is like manufacturing widgets in a factory. except the widgets are yellow and delicious. Compare that to the apple. The apple world is a chaotic mess of diversity. You have Honeycrisp, Gala, Fuji, Red Delicious, Granny Smith. They all have different harvest cycles, different shelf lives, and different needs. Take the Honeycrisp, for example. It is the current superstar of the apple world, but it is a total nightmare to grow. It does not ripen evenly. You cannot just strip the tree in one go. Labor crews might have to pass through a Honeycrisp orchard up to 5 separate times to harvest the crop. Think about that for a second. For a banana, you go in, you cut the giant bunch, and you are done. For a high-end apple, you are paying for a skilled worker to climb a ladder, check the color, pick a few fruits, come down, move the ladder, and do it all over again next week. That lack of biological uniformity drives up the labor cost massively. This brings us to the dry-sounding but actually fascinating world of economics, specifically comparative advantage and opportunity cost. Stick with me here, because this explains the math behind the madness. In economics, the cost of something isn't just the price tag, it's the opportunity cost, or the value of what you have to give up to produce it. Let's imagine a simplified world where a country produces both apples and bananas. If that country wants to produce 5 more apples, it might have to give up producing 4 bananas because of the labor and land required. In this scenario, the opportunity cost of 1 apple is 0.8 bananas. Conversely, the opportunity cost of 1 banana is 1.25 apples. Basically, if a tropical region has the perfect climate and cheap labor, it has a comparative advantage. It is just inherently cheaper for them to produce bananas than it is for Washington state to produce apples. And speaking of labor, we have to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the gorilla in the orchard. The most significant driver of the banana's low price is something called labor arbitrage. That is a fancy way of saying paying people in one place a lot less than people in another place. Let's look at Washington state, the hub of the US apple industry. As of early 2026, the average annual pay for an apple picker there is nearly $40,000. That breaks down to about $19 an hour. That is a real wage. It comes with regulations, social security contributions, workers, compensation, and often housing and healthcare benefits under visa programs. Now let's look at the banana plantations in places like Costa Rica or Guatemala. The wage disparity is shocking. Workers in some regions earn less than $300 a month for 10-hour days in grueling conditions. We are talking about carrying 60-kilogram banana bunches with metal hooks that dig into your shoulders. There are reports of indigenous workers earning as little as $56 a month. When you compare $19 an hour to $300 a month, the math becomes brutal. For every dollar you spend on a banana, only about 5 to 9% goes to the workers and growers. The rest is taken by retailers and shipping companies. For an apple, the grower's share is much higher because the labor input is so much more expensive. The cheapness of the banana is effectively subsidized by what some researchers call wretched pay and conditions that border on modern slavery. So, we have established that bananas are cheap to grow because of clones and low wages. But wait, you might say, they still have to travel 3,000 miles. Surely the shipping costs ruin the savings. Nope. And this is where we learn a surprising lesson about physics. Water is better than asphalt. It turns out, the distance a product travels matters way less than the mode of transport. Ocean freight is a logistical superpower. It is the most cost-effective way to move heavy stuff on the planet. Massive container ships can carry thousands of refrigerated containers, called reefers. A standard 40-foot container can hold 20 pallets of bananas. A single ship can carry over 12,000 tons of cargo. The energy required to move a ton of bananas by sea is tiny, about 0.11 megajoules per ton-kilometer. It is wildly efficient. Now compare that to the domestic apple. Apples travel by truck. While trucks are great for door-to-door delivery, they are expensive and inefficient compared to ships. In 2025, the rate for a refrigerated truck in the US was hovering around $2.80 per mile. If you are moving apples from Washington to New York, that adds up fast. Also, consider the volume. A semi-truck is limited to about 45,000 pounds of cargo. A ship carries tens of thousands of tons. The domestic apple producer has to pay a driver $19 an hour to drive a truck across the country. The banana company uses a mechanized port crane that can process 480 boxes per minute and puts them on a ship that floats with minimal friction. Essentially, moving a banana 3,000 miles through the water costs less energy and money than dragging an apple 100 miles over asphalt. But the journey doesn't end when the fruit arrives. We have to talk about the cold chain and the energy it takes to keep this fruit fresh. This brings us to the zombie apple versus the ripen-on-demand banana. Apples are seasonal. They are harvested once a year, usually in the fall. But you want to buy apples in May, right? To make that happen, apples are put into controlled atmosphere storage. They suck the oxygen out of the room and drop the temperature to between 0 and 3 degrees Celsius. This puts the apple into a sort of suspended animation. Keeping apples cold for 6 months is a massive energy drain. Studies show that storing apples for 6 months increases electricity usage by over 700% compared to selling them fresh. The carbon footprint of a stored apple is nearly double that of a fresh one. Bananas are different. They are harvested year-round. They don't need to be stored for months. They are cut green, shipped at a cool but not freezing 13 degrees Celsius, and then they are ripened on demand. When the bananas reach their destination, they are put into ripening rooms for just a few days. They are blasted with ethylene gas, which triggers that uniform ripening we talked about. Because the turnover is so fast, tree to shelf in under 3 weeks, the banana avoids those months and months of cumulative electricity costs that burden the apple. So, the banana is cheaper to grow, cheaper to pick, cheaper to ship, and cheaper to store. But there is one final piece of the puzzle, and it's all in your head. Well, it's in the retailer's head, but it's manipulating yours. It is called the loss leader strategy. Supermarkets view bananas and apples as two totally different types of financial instruments. In the retail world, the banana is a known value item. Along with milk and eggs, it is one of the few items where you, the customer, actually memorize the price. You know bananas should be around 64 cents a pound. If you walk into a store and see bananas for $1 a pound, you subconsciously think, wow, this whole store is a rip-off, and you might leave. To prevent this, retailers often sell bananas at cost, or even below cost. They lose money on every banana you buy, just to get you in the door. They treat the loss as a marketing expense. They know that once you are inside with your cheap bananas, you will probably buy a box of cereal, some fancy cheese, or, hey, maybe some Honeycrisp apples. The apple, specifically premium varieties like the Honeycrisp, is the opposite. It is a profit generator. Retailers know you treat apples as a premium healthy snack. The margins on apples can be huge. In the 23-24 season, the retail margin on Honeycrisp apples hit 60%. The store might be paying the grower $1 a pound, but they are charging you $2.50. They are using the profit from the apple to subsidize the loss on the banana. So when you see that price gap, it's not just about logistics. It's a deliberate strategy to manipulate your perception of value. Finally, we have to look at the hidden costs, the stuff that doesn't show up on the receipt. The banana is considered an inflation-proof essential for American families. Because of this, the government often steps in to keep prices low. Bananas are frequently exempted from tariffs. In late 2025, the US government specifically modified tariff scopes to remove levies on bananas to help lower food prices. Meanwhile, domestic apple growers were begging for subsidies, literally billions of dollars in farmer bridge payments, to survive rising costs and unfair trade practices. And then there are the environmental and social costs. If we actually paid for the damage caused by banana production, the fruit would be much more expensive. We are talking about massive pesticide usage. In countries like Costa Rica, banana production accounts for half of all pesticide consumption. They use chemicals like chlorpyrifos, which is banned for most food uses in the US but is still used on the bananas we import. These chemicals lead to health issues for workers and environmental damage that is estimated to cost over $6 per box if it were actually accounted for. But those costs are externalized. They are paid by the environment and the workers in the tropics, not by you at the checkout counter. So let's summarize this paradox. The reason a banana from the equator is cheaper than an apple from down the road is a perfect storm of history, science, and economics. It started with the banana empire, which built a vertically integrated machine to bypass the middleman. It is sustained by biological monoculture, using a clone that allows for industrial precision that the diverse apple cannot match. It relies on labor arbitrage, capitalizing on the massive gap between Washington wages and tropical poverty. It leverages the superpower of ocean freight, moving fruit across water for a fraction of the cost of trucking it over land. It saves energy by avoiding long-term cold storage, ripening fruit on demand rather than keeping it on life support for months. And finally, it is anchored by retail psychology, where stores intentionally lose money on bananas to trick you into thinking their prices are low, while making their profit back on the apples. It is a logistical miracle, but it is also a reminder that in the global supply chain, a low price often hides a high cost somewhere else. Now, I want to hear from you. Does knowing the backstory of the banana change how you see that 60-cent price tag? Would you be willing to pay more for a banana if it meant better wages for the workers? Or is the cheap banana a non-negotiable part of your grocery budget? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos about the global supply chain.